Okay, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining our panel today. We are so happy to have everyone. I am going to go ahead and introduce all of our speakers and our group, and then we're going to get started. So I'm Carly Paskey, and my group members are Lawson Howard, Grace Williams, Emmy Claus, Jessica Butler, and Jimmy. And this is we have some questions set up for our panel, but this is going to be more of an open table discussion. Anyone can ask any questions in the chat, and Emmy is going to be monitoring it. So we're super excited to get started.
And if each of y'all want to do just like a small introduction of like yourself, your role, like certain, just describe yourself a little bit for the speakers or the audience, sorry.
Okay, so I'm Pam Booker, and currently I serve as the Alex Gregory Leader in Residence here at Georgia College. I also teach Transforming the Leader in You. It's one of our leadership classes. And then from a Georgia College perspective, I serve as the president of the Alumni Board of Directors.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Chavonda Mills. Currently, I serve as the Department Chair of Chemistry, Physics, and Astronomy here at Georgia College. I am the first woman and the first person of color to hold this position. Prior to this role, I served 3 years as the Interim Associate Dean for the College of Arts and Sciences. And over my 15-year tenure at Georgia College, I have held various leadership roles. I've served as presiding officer of our University Senate, co-chair of the President's Commission on Diversity, co-chair of the University Strategic Plan Steering Committee, and I also co-founded the Women's Leadership Faculty Fellows Program. So I share that with you all just to illustrate how important it is to have a diverse portfolio of leadership experiences as you're looking to further develop yourself.
My name is Ashley Copeland. I serve as the Assistant Director of Leadership Programs at Georgia College, and I find myself following in the footsteps of these two wonderful women who I get to interact with and work with on many different things at the university. So in my role, I teach classes, I get to work with students, primarily focused on leadership development. For myself, I often jump on any chance to take up any sort of leadership role or any opportunity to even further develop myself. So I'm lucky that I also was able to be co-host and co-planners in the Women's Leadership Conference with Melissa and Jennifer and Mosme and Carrie Brown. But in the community, I also do a little bit more. So I serve as a chamber ambassador. I've done a few different leadership programs that's focused on community development and community leadership. Young Game Changers is one of the names, Leadership Baldwin. So I look for opportunities that are outside of the 9 to or 8 to 5 kind of work time to develop myself in leadership.
Well, thank you all so much for being here and being a part of our panel. I'll just get right to it with one of the first questions I wanted to ask y'all was, what is something each of you have learned from your positions in your various forms of leadership?
So I don't mind starting. So prior to working with Georgia College, my prior role was as an assistant vice president at AT&T. And I worked for AT&T for almost 29 years. And through those 29 years, I held several key leadership positions, all the way from sales to operations and then to HR. And the one thing that was consistent is communication. You have got to be a good communicator. When you're a leader, the way that people will follow you, the way that people will know what the mission is, what's important that needs to get accomplished, is through the communication that you have with your team, with your leadership, and with other people that may be impacted. So one of the things that I stress, even within our Transforming the Leader in You classes, communication is so important as a leader. You have to be able to communicate. You have to want to communicate, and it's not just from what you say, but it's also in your written communication. And it's vitally important for your success. You're going to have to be a good communicator in order for you to be successful as a leader.
I'll share next. I wholeheartedly agree with Dr. Booker that communication is key. And I'll add to that making sure you find your passion and do what's meaningful to you as you seek out your leadership positions. I think that allows you to remain grounded, but also remain excited about your role. Making sure that you're doing meaningful work. I've had, as I mentioned, several leadership opportunities at Georgia College, but I was very intentional about which opportunities I accepted or which opportunities I sought out. So all of the areas I mentioned were areas that I'm passionate about and that I know that would be fulfilling for me, but also matches my skill set so that I'm able to contribute effectively to those areas. So we just had our Women's Leadership Conference this past Friday, and there was a lot of discussion about finding your passion, doing what is meaningful for you. So I think that's also very important.
I guess for me, I still feel like I'm learning a lot about leadership. And I guess my biggest thing in the recent years is to learn to develop some autonomy pretty early on. Be confident in the projects that you take on, and know that those things are not going to just fall at your feet. People aren't going to come knocking on your door always saying, hey, you are perfect for this leadership role. Ideally, we'd all be in those places, and we'd live in a much different world if that were to happen. But it's important to seek out places to, learn more, right? Attending things like this, attending opportunities to learn, like the Women's Leadership Conference. There are community events, but then also when you go to those events, insert yourself a little bit, be able to step forward and say, hey, Pam, I heard you gave that great speech. Would you be able to meet me for coffee to talk about this a little bit further? So being okay with stepping forward a little bit to kind of insert yourself in some of those arenas. And then feel confident when you do it. Like I said, finding opportunities to develop that autonomy. So in your group projects, be kind of forward with it, be confident in what you're doing. So that's a really important skill, I think, to learn early on. And one I think that a lot of employers look for too.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Those were all wonderful answers. Another question that I had was, have you guys faced any difficulties in working as a woman in leadership?
I feel like the answer is always going to be yes. Easily loaded question. More of my difficulties, just from my kind of background, I worked in restaurant service for a good bit, and sometimes that is not the most sometimes it is a toxic culture of who gets to make decisions about things. So just in general, I think in that kind of arena itself, it's a little bit challenging to maybe find your voice in some of those places. So that would be kind of one of those areas that I found a little challenging to myself, but through that it was not necessarily being just kind of demanding, but like having a timeline, having a plan, having a goal and a vision set forth, and like showing confidence that, hey, these are the benchmarks that we've hit, this is what we've done, like showing that like this plan is working, that, what we have laid out, to build confidence kind of in my leadership that way. I would guess another one would also be in my hesitancy sometimes to apply for things. Even the job that I have now, And so when I was applying for this position in leadership programs, I was working in advancement at university or at Georgia College. So I, was doing fundraising, making phone calls. I was doing direct mail, and I thought like, wow, this is a really great position, but I'm not sure if I qualify. But in looking and going down the list of all the qualifications, a history of teaching, a focus on leadership, we wanted someone who had, good pedagogy, who was interested in educating students in unique ways. And then I realized, and it took, going to some mentors, some folks that I looked up to that said, no, those are 100% of the qualities that you have, like you need to apply. So it's still in some of those arenas, it's trying to develop some of that self-confidence too, and like know that you belong, and being a little bit more forward and I guess honest with yourself too.
Yeah, and you know what I would say to that? So many times there's stereotypes of what a position should look like and who would best match that particular position. And what I have found is, to Ashley's point, you have to look at the positions, look at your own skills, and if you align to that position, go forth and do. Don't allow the stereotypes to kind of box you in, because that's exactly what happens. And I think about some of the roles that I've had where the prior leadership had been males. And then I come into this role as a female and people are expecting me to act a certain way. And what I learned through some of my mentors was, you need to be Pam. You need to be Pam. If you go in there into that position being somebody else or trying to align to a style that is not your style, then you're going to fail, because you're an imposter. Essentially, you're an imposter. And after a while, you get tired of being an imposter. You get tired of being a puppet and all of that. And so the thing is, don't allow the stereotypes. Go into the positions or whatever the role is. Even on campus, there's roles that you all could actually apply for or be a part of that the stereotype may look different than the female. But for you, you have the skills to go into that role. Go into the role, apply for the role. And once you get into the role, be yourself, because the best you is the best you for the position, if that makes sense to you all. So that was one of the things, is just try your best not to get caught into a stereotype, that it has to look this way, and just have that confidence in yourself and the skills that you have, the training that you have, the courses and the leadership skills that you've taken, the courses that you've taken and leadership skills you've gained. Have confidence in that and go forth and do.
I'm glad to hear both Ashley and Pam touch on imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. That is the first thing that I wrote down as well. So I'm glad to hear that I'm not alone and that this has been a challenge for me, but I'm also concerned that it still remains a challenge for so many women in leadership positions. You'll notice that as you continue to advance in the ranks, as you advance in leadership, you become very isolated. Oftentimes, you are the only woman that is at the table. You are the only woman that has a voice in this decision-making situation. And so it is difficult. It's difficult, and we have to learn how to cope with that. The recommendations that Ashley and Pamela shared are right on. They're on point. You have to, number one, know that you're not alone. Okay, so you're not the only one experiencing this, but also identify mentors, build a network so you will have someone to reach out to. Oftentimes that network may be outside of your business, outside of your corporation, because you are the only one in your position. So seek out affinity groups in other corporations, other businesses. For me as a scientist, a female scientist in a male-dominated field, I'm often the only woman at my conferences. I'm often the only woman that's at the table. And so what I've done is I've built a network with other women at other higher ed institutions. So I have people to share with. I have people to just vent to. Sometimes we need that. but also people that I can give support to and can also support me. I'm going to shift the topic slightly because I think it's also important as women leaders for us to discuss work-life balance. We hear that often in terms of leadership, and the question becomes, how do you do it? There's no right answer. There's no right answer on how you can balance your work and your personal life. For me, I'm married, I have a husband, and I have 2 young children, both elementary age children. It's difficult, it's hard. And so what I've done is I've learned that I'm not perfect. You know, I've learned to set my boundaries and say, okay, this is enough. I'm gonna have to say no to some requests, but I've also learned how to seek support from community members, seek support from family, seek support from friends. It's okay if all my clothes don't get washed and folded, you know, in a week's time. Right now, I have about 4 clothes baskets in my bedroom, and I'm okay with that. But it takes time to get to that point. So figure out what's going to work well for you, and just be okay with it. You'll eventually get there, and it may take some time, but once you get there, embrace it fully. It would definitely bring peace of mind to you and allow those around you to know your boundaries.
Mhm. And I'm glad you brought that up, because being a single person with no children, a lot of people feel like I have a lot of time and a lot of extra time. And so many times people will try to put their own, almost like they try to give me a schedule. And it's a schedule of their things that they need to get done. And I'm sitting here saying, oh, no, that's not mine. That's not mine. Because one of the things that you have to do, just like Dr. Mills said, those boundaries, you have to put up boundaries, because if you do not, people will schedule time, and then you yourself will also do the same thing. You'll pour on and load on all of these different things onto yourself and onto your calendar, and then you're trying to figure out, how do I get all of these things done? Then you get upset because then you're overwhelmed. So it's like, no. Sometimes you have to not only put up boundaries for people, you have to put some boundaries around yourself and say, you know what, this is what I'm going to get done today, and I'm not going to feel bad if I don't wash that load of clothes. And sometimes for me, I used to have this thing. My mother said, you will not go to bed with any dishes in the sink. And for, I don't know, up until probably a couple of years ago, I don't care if it was 1 fork and a cup, it was getting washed. Then I started saying, you know what? If I fall asleep, I just fall asleep. I'm not going to put that pressure on myself that I have to get all of these things done. I'm going to figure out what's important today, and I'm going to get done the things that are important. And I kind of define what's important based on the value of the things that are around me. So even for work, I currently, probably beyond Georgia College, I'm the director of strategic and ministry engagement at my church. That takes a lot. It's an operations position, so it takes a lot. So I have to literally every day think about, what are the things that I'm going to be able to accomplish for that. I also do consulting work, and so I put all of those different things in boxes and determine how much time I can allocate to each one of them. But in the midst of all of that, I also have to have some self-care. I have to have some time for myself. Even as a single person, I need to debrief and have some time that it's just me and my thoughts about, and self-reflection about my day, about myself, about what do I need to do to go get my nails done. If I'm gonna get my nails done, whatever it is, I need to have that self-care time as well. Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of curious too, with the way like this discussion is currently going. Chavonda, you mentioned this too, that sometimes maybe you are the only woman at the table, and maybe, is there some sort of maybe stereotype that we put on ourselves that like, well, now my voice speaks for this other group of women and now I have to set my standard higher, and now I have to do more to prove myself more, and I have to do more to do better than my male colleagues, so I do just get a base recognition kind of thing. I'm curious if some of that is maybe coming into play.
Yeah, it definitely does come into play, Ashley. And I think as women, and for me as a person of color as well, it comes into play often. I constantly think about my performance and how it will impact the person coming behind me. If I perform well and I set this high standard, does that then open the door for other women and people of color? And they are then presented with opportunities because I've proven that, yes, we are competent. Yes, we are qualified and credentialed. And yes, we can complete our tasks. So it is an added burden, but it is one that I've learned to embrace. And I shoulder that responsibility. I understand that for me is paving a path for others. And that's important. I think that's why I'm willing to shoulder that responsibility, because I know that someone else did it before I did it. Mm-hmm. And I recognize that. And so I want to continue that. I know that the associate dean that served before me in the College of Arts and Sciences was the first woman of color to hold that position. And then I was offered that opportunity. I understand that pipeline. So I definitely want to continue it. Is it fair? No, it's not, but it's the position we're in. Mm-hmm.
Thank you guys so much for sharing and taking the reins there. I love where that conversation went. That was awesome. I do have some individual questions for everyone. So I'm going to start with Ms. Copeland first. I saw that you had a conference on Friday about women in leadership. So I was just wondering if you could tell us how that went, what y'all were able to do. I wasn't able to join it, but it looked really awesome.
Yeah, so the Women's Leadership Conference is, of course, my favorite event to plan, but it's not me and it's not me alone. It is one of the few things I find that is truly a collaborative effort from a lot of different folks at this university. I would say, Melissa on this call, Pam and Chavonda all had a role in the conference itself, either being speakers, planners, on steering committees, because that's what I think the spirit of women's leadership can be, is that we're, building bridges, making networks. We're getting folks to communicate and interact that maybe don't have the opportunity in other spaces or arenas. So this conference is in its third year. The first year it was primarily planned between our office and the Women's Center. It went really well. We had lots of student attendees, and then we expanded from there and thought, who else needs to actually come to this table? Who are we not including that we should be including? Thinking about community members, thinking about our alumni, knowing that the impact of the conference can go further than just our student body. And that's where we've taken it into the third year, even thinking about more outreach to community members. And the attendance list, I was quite surprised that it was actually majority non-students, because there is a need for women's leadership and opportunities for folks to learn about women's leadership in our community, in our networks, folks that we know, but even in the Milledgeville, Baldwin County, the Middle Georgia area, to learn about these things, because there's not that opportunity that you have here at a university where you get to host these GC2Y events, you get to attend lots of these webinars, even in-person things. So I'm glad that that can be a resource and something moving forward that can expand and get bigger and bigger. I say the setup of the conference, we were virtual this year, of course. We wanted to make sure it happened because we had that kind of weight on our shoulders, knowing that, folks are looking for opportunities to learn and to network with folks. So we wanted to make sure that it still happened this year, because we kind of carried that weight in the back of our minds, knowing that folks would jump on this opportunity. And the focus this year, so it's always, and the focus is always leading change. So there's always an action associated with it. an action associated with leadership. But the focus this year was more on finding that passion. I think a lot of us over the past year now, moving into year 2 of pandemic, have had time to reflect about the things we like, the things we don't like. What are the social movements that, impacted us? What were those things that we were called to action to want to do more? What arenas did we want to begin taking action? And that was the focus for this year, is to, we've had this full year of reflection time. Now let's do something with it to give folks an idea of what their next step can be. Again, acting in those arenas.
Thank you. That sounds really awesome. It sounded like a great event. Dr. Booker, I have a question for you. I saw that you are the Alex Gregory Leader in Residence position. So I was wondering if you could maybe tell us a little bit about that and what all it entails and how you came to hold this position.
So thank you. And I love the promotion. One day I really will be a doctor. So I really love that promotion. So thank you so much. But Alex Gregory Leader in Residence, it is a phenomenal opportunity for an individual, and in this case, me for the last 2 years, to have an opportunity to share our experiences from a corporate or a leader perspective with the student body and the teachers and faculty members and administration at Georgia College. It's an awesome opportunity, but it actually originated from Alex Gregory. Alex Gregory not only is he one of our alumni, but he used to be a CEO of YKK America. And when you think about the importance of his role, he was the first American to actually serve in a senior position with YKK. And he was responsible for, it's a Japanese company. Most of you will can actually relate to it because it has to do with, they build zippers, but they do a lot of other things, but we mostly know them for the zippers because if you look at your pants, more than likely they have YKK on them. But when he retired, this was the company actually awarded Georgia College this. I say it's a great award that they actually presented and named this in his honor. But what he really wanted was for individuals to come into this role to give back to Georgia College that level of expertise and experiences that they've had, and to just pour back into our students, really and truly pour into our students and to share with them leadership and what it takes to be a leader, but also helping them to understand humility, the importance of humility as a leader. And so Alex Gregory is just an amazing man. You will see him on campus. He's here quite frequently, to be honest with you. He spoke to my leadership class a few weeks ago, but just has an amazing story. The process is being nominated, and once you're nominated and you're voted on by a group of individuals that are from a leadership perspective on campus, including the Vice President of Advancement, and then of course Dr. Dorman has to approve it as well. So Dr. Mock, who's on this call as well, and Ashley work very closely with the individual that's selected for that role. They make sure that the work that we're doing, that I'm doing, emulates the role that what it's really supposed to do. So hopefully that helps explain a little bit. But through the role, I've had an opportunity to do one Inspire engagement last year. I had an opportunity to speak right before the pandemic, literally the week before the pandemic started. And then I've spoken to an HR class before. I've spoken to the leadership classes. And then now over the last 2 semesters, I've been teaching a leadership class. And so it's been an amazing opportunity that I believe I'm learning more and getting more out of it than the students are, to be honest with you. It's been just that it's been very enriching. I guess that's the best way to really kind of describe it for me. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And then Dr. Mills, my question for you is, despite the challenges often faced by women in the scientific field. What kept you going throughout all of that?
So as I mentioned earlier, it's important to find your passion. And for me, part of that passion is educating students, all of you, and knowing that I'm helping in your development and helping you reach your career goals. And so just as a faculty member, as someone who has a love for higher education, having that connection with my students, having that impact on my students' lives has kept me motivated to continue to seek leadership opportunities in higher education. As I've risen through the ranks, I have a voice that carries more weight. And I feel that I can make even a broader impact. I can make a broader impact if I'm at the department chair's level or above. Of course, we can make an impact at any level, but you have to leverage where you're at and make sure you're using that voice and your influence to have that positive impact. And so I think that's been key for me. I'm seeing the successes of our students as well as my colleagues. That also has driven me to continue to pursue leadership opportunities in higher education.
Now I have a question for each of you to answer. My question is, what you find most fulfilling about being a woman in leadership? What is it that you find most fulfilling, either for yourself or in general for the other people that you're around? If you teach a class for them, in general, if you could choose a couple things or one thing, then what do you find most fulfilling about your position?
Okay, I'll go. So, and I really would like to answer that by talking about my prior role at AT&T. In my role there, I was the assistant vice president over talent acquisition, which was the group that was responsible for hiring. And what I found most fulfilling about that role was the ability to impact individuals' lives. And that's what I used to tell my team all the time. We are in a position where we are placing individuals in jobs and helping them to start careers. And we don't always know the impact that we're having on not just their life, but the lives of their entire family. Some of the people that we are placing in positions are now able to feed their family, or they're able to send their children to college, or they're able to travel and do and really reach career goals or life goals that they've never been able to achieve before. And so what I used to always tell my team was, because we don't know how we're impacting someone's life, we have to take every job that we fill and treat it as gold, and truly treat not the job, just the job as gold, but the individuals as gold. And to truly help them to understand, not only are we giving you this opportunity, but help them to understand what to do with the opportunity. I told them it's not enough just to fill the role, but make sure that they understand what's in front of them, all of the opportunities that they have in front of them with accepting a position with the company. That was so fulfilling for me, because I would have people to come back and tell me the stories of what it meant for them to actually receive their job offer and to get their first paycheck, and or when their child got into school years and years later, 15 years later, we would have people that had come back and talked and gave us these different stories. And so what was fulfilling the most for me was just being able to be that type of an influence to my team, and also for the people who actually became new employees with AT&T. So that was most fulfilling to me, just to see lives changed.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Pam said. I I think intrinsic to my job, teaching leadership is that I hopefully am inspiring the next generation of leaders. So I take the lessons I've learned, what I've read, what I've experienced, what I know exists in the world, and hopefully translate that into at least digestible tidbits, digestible, lessons, experiences for students, so they can go out and make the world a better place. So they can go out and, be, pave the way for others. And I think that's the most rewarding, is that, makes me sleep at night, is that the world will be a better place because we learned how to manage stakeholders. The world will be a better place because, we sent that email and people registered for an event like this. It's one more opportunity for someone to learn a lesson, to have an experience. And I think that's truly the best part of the job that I have now.
And I've already touched on a little bit of what's fulfilling for me, but I'll just add to that and say, just being able to be a role model for students, for my colleagues, being able to be a strong example of a woman in a successful woman in a leadership position, and making myself accessible, like this event today, making myself accessible to share my thoughts with all of you. If a student wants to speak to me regarding their career goals, I make myself accessible to that. If a colleague wants to speak to me regarding their career advancement, then I make myself accessible to that. And so I think just being that role model, being accessible, and being a sponsor, that is something that is going to be key as all of you enter into your careers and look to advance. Oftentimes we talk about mentors. Very rarely do we talk about the importance of having a sponsor. And there is a difference. A sponsor is someone that is in that decision-making position. And when opportunities arise, that sponsor puts your name out there, mentions your name for that opportunity. So as you're building your network, identify those sponsors, but not only identify them, once you're in that leadership role, become a sponsor. So that's something else that I've been very intentional about, and I find fulfilling, so that I am able to help others advance in their career. If an award comes up, I can nominate one of my faculty, or I can nominate one of my students. But just remembering, once you get to that table, pull up those that are behind you. And you can do that by being a sponsor.
And that is so, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is so very important. I think about the person that was my sponsor for the last 8 years of my career at AT&T, who, by the way, is going to be speaking to our class in the next couple of weeks. But exactly, he was the person that nominated me for, not just for promotions, but lateral moves that I made within the company, but also for different workshops, professional development, nominated me for those different things. And so I owe a lot to my sponsor. so definitely that's very relevant. Thank you for that.
My question is for all of y'all. What are some defining characteristics for a woman in leadership? And for us, how would we kind of grow those characteristics and like become like y'all?
Okay, so there are so many, and I'm trying to just quickly think through some of those. We've already talked about communication. Okay, Ms. Booker mentioned the importance of communication. I think emotional intelligence is another important characteristic for women leaders. Emotional intelligence in the sense that you understand your team. Okay, you understand that your team and each member has a different personality. Each member makes a different contribution to the team effort, and just being able to lead effectively, keeping in mind that leadership is very relational. It is very relational. It is grounded in building relationships. And so you have to be emotionally intelligent. You have to work well with your team. How do you build that? You're doing that now in your classes. You know, as you're having to complete group projects, this project, you had to work with a diverse team, making sure that you provide a safe space so that everyone brings their ideas to the table, providing a space so that everyone feels comfortable sharing. And then not only sharing, but making sure you value those diverse perspectives. That is also very important as you move up into your careers.
Those were my number one and number two. I had emotional intelligence was number one, and diversity of thought was my number two, because so many times we get stuck on diversity, but we don't think about it from the full range of what diversity really means. And diversity of thought is very important because people do have different perspectives. I think about, I'm going to go back to emotional intelligence, and I'm going to speak to it from the perspective of so many times people expect us to be, as women, to be emotional, meaning we just react to things in a certain way. And sometimes they even are expecting us to cry about everything, or to exhibit anger, or to yell, stomp, I mean, all of these things. And we're sitting here saying, no. Emotional intelligence and knowing how to self-manage your emotions is so important in a role, because, and it's not just for women, it's for men as well, but we just get, we end up, ours plays out a little bit differently than a man's. Okay, I'm just going to say it that way. So it's so important that we're able to manage our emotions, and with that, that means that self-management, that means I recognize situations that may take me to a place where I may lose my my cool. So therefore, I'm going to manage that situation, or I'm going to manage that person that may cause me to go to those extremes. But by the same token, we have to understand how to manage relationships that we actually are involved in, because some relationships can cause us to actually step outside of the realm of who we are. And so we have to be able to manage those. I think Dr. Mills' perspective on relationships are so important, because we need to be able to build healthy relationships with people, with the people that we lead, as well as the people that are above us, as well as our colleagues. We have to be able to build healthy relationships, and we can't just take it for granted that it's just going to happen, because it's more than likely not just going to happen. It requires us to take some steps to make that actually happen. And so emotional intelligence is huge. That's one of our topics that in our Transforming the Leader in You, we're spending weeks talking about emotional intelligence and taking assessments. There's assessments out there that you can take. And assessments are just that, right? They give you a little bit of range as to where you might be. And so that's, to me, those are important. But just being able to manage your emotions in a way that can be seen as, that person is level-headed. That person knows how to, even when everything is on fire, they know how to remain calm. They know how to still be able to make decisions that make sense, even in the midst of those heated situations. That's what people are looking for. That's what leaders are looking for in other leaders. So I think both of those are just very important.
Yeah, to add kind of a big broad piece. I mean, when you think about your career, you can learn the hard skills of the job. Like, they can train you to use Excel. They can train you to use the next software system. They can send you to a week-long conference to be able to learn this new policy procedure manual. What's harder for places to teach you are those interpersonal skills. The ability to think critically, the ability to, think creative, to manage, in a crisis. Thinking about all of this past year, right? The ability to make good decisions, to be, at what point do you need so much information that you kind of find yourself frozen, unable to make a choice. And really, again, like thinking about how you manage like complex situations. So those are the skills I think are important to practice now, while you have folks that are here to support you as students. Again, because you will go into those careers and they'll train you on the other pieces. So learning how you act in, various situations, specifically managing those skills, I think are good to practice early on. So find those places where you can practice those things.
Mhm.
All right. My question is, what are some of the leadership opportunities for women on campus, and maybe even what are some future ideas for different opportunities?
Well, I can tell you about some things we do now at the university. So our office exists to make sure that there are many touch points for students to seek out and practice leadership. So we have, a first year student leadership program where we kind of do some of the intro, like what does it mean to, lead yourself, and even thinking about, well, how can you act on those ideas now at the university? It's called the Leadership Academy. We have 2 academic programs, a leadership certificate program, which is focused on, developing these, skills of collaboration, communication, managing complexity. That is the program that Pam and I both teach in, is the leadership certificate program. We have a third program. It's called the Georgia Education Mentorship Program, better known as GEM, and it's much easier to say and remember. And this is a program that is a year-long mentorship program for students. Now, these are open to any Georgia College student specifically. We do also, host the women, or co-host the Women's Leadership Conference every year. We will continue to do that conference. We bring speakers to campus, our Inspire Speakers Forum. So we try to bring about 4 speakers every year to campus, and those are open to everyone at the university. But the other piece is that we work with university departments, programs, to make sure that anything that is focused on leadership kind of meets that same, high quality impact piece. So like they all are focusing on critical thinking, creative thinking, managing complexity, these ideas. So programs like the Learning Center, all of the student instructors, that's a leadership program, all the students that serve as CAs in the residence halls now. We've been working with Jennifer Graham and the Women's Center for students in that office to develop their leadership. So no matter what, there are many opportunities for students to practice leadership at this university. And it's important to find, the reason you want to learn about leadership. It's kind of one thing to say, yes, leadership is important, but like, why? Is it because you want to teach? Is it because you want to, go into a workplace and take on leadership roles? Like thinking about the actions you want to take with leadership is important. And then once you've got that figured out, just like Chavonda said, find that passion, what you're interested in most. There is going to be something that is focused on leadership in those areas for you. You guys have ideas to add too?
Yeah, I agree with Ashley in that Georgia College offers a lot of opportunities for leadership to students and faculty and staff. But sometimes you have to create your own opportunities, and don't be afraid to do that. If there's an area that you're passionate about and there's not a space yet created for that, then create it yourself. If there's an organization that you want to form, then figure out the process for doing that. So don't pigeonhole yourself. Don't limit yourself by what's currently available to you. Create your own opportunities. And I'm sure some of you have done that. I'm sure Ms. Booker and Ms. Copeland have done that as well. But don't be afraid to step out and just see what happens. It may or may not be successful. You might have to pivot and modify your plan, but embrace that. Don't be afraid to just step out there and create something for yourself.
Yeah, and I would agree. And the other thing is the organizations that you're a part of already, seek leadership roles in those positions. I mean, in those particular organizations. There are so many different organizations on campus. And so I would just encourage you, wherever you are currently involved, you may want to just seek a leadership opportunity there. But then the other piece of it is just know you do not have to carry a title to be a leader. So you can lead and not have a title with it. So keep that in mind. The one thing I will share with you, though, I would not suggest that you just go out and just join every organization just so that you can have that on your resume when you do your resume. Because one of the things that we looked for when we were hiring college students, fresh out of college, was not just how many organizations they were a part of, but what did they do in those organizations. So if I were going to interview you and you listed that you were a part of an organization at your college, I'm going to ask you, tell me a little bit about your role in that organization. And 9 times out of 10, if your name was just on the roll and that was it, then you're probably not going to be able to answer that question. Or you're going to tell me all the things that the organization did, but you're never going to tell me what you did as a part of the organization. So I would say start there if you're not already leading in some particular organization. Things that you're passionate about, go forth and do, and try to be a leader in those particular organizations.
I think that's great advice,
Yeah.
Ms. Booker. And I'll note that it's nice to see trends. Okay, so let's say you're passionate about the environment and you serve on the Sustainability Council, and then you're president of the Environmental Science Club, and then you volunteered for the Adopt a Stream initiative this past December. So that clearly lets your future employers know, okay, they're not just putting their name on that list of membership. They're actually intentional about which organizations, which leadership opportunities they're seeking out. So I wholeheartedly agree. And I think that's great advice. And just keep that in mind as you're pursuing those opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my one addition was, if you don't know, where to go or, how to find something, ask people. I mean, your professors, the faculty, the staff at the university are here. I would encourage you to attend city council meetings, to attend those board meetings that happen in the Milledgeville Baldwin County community, because you learn those things now. We can connect you with those people now. So whenever you go into your next community, you go to live in Atlanta, you go to live in Augusta, some other place, you know how to take up community leadership. To do more, again, than just your kind of 8 or 9 to 5, because your job might not be everything that you are passionate about, and that's okay, because you get to find a place where you can blend all those things. I love leadership and I love teaching students, but I also love to be active in my community, so I seek those things out too. So again, if you don't know where to go, just ask. We are all happy to connect you with folks that can help you tackle those things.
And Ashley, I think that community aspect of it is so very important, because many times you're going to find in the community, especially a lot of the 501c3 type organizations, they are looking for people who have various skill sets and just a desire to want to be a part. And once you become a part of some of those organizations, you would not believe how you become exposed and open to so many different leadership type roles, or different types of roles that places you in positions to be a leader, or have opportunities to demonstrate leadership skills. But nonprofits and different community type organizations are critically important. And once again, from an employer perspective, we love to see volunteerism on your resume. But once again, we're not looking for it from the perspective of you just having your name attached to this particular organization. We are looking for you to have been an active participant in that organization for whatever your work assignment was while you were there.
I'd say, if you recall too, Dr. Mills referenced that leadership is about relationships. You can't imagine the networks and relationships that you can make with Habitat for Humanity here in Milledgeville that will take you to far off places. There's a Habitat for Humanity in many other places and cities and towns. and developing and getting your foot in the door and making those connections now will set you up for success, even if it is, it's potentially working with Habitat, it's writing them a grant. So there are other ways to act in leadership outside of the university too, and I encourage you to do those things. Again, we all have connections, we can help you make those too.
We have about 5 minutes left, and we're going to dedicate that to closing and the couple of questions we have in the chat. So the first one is for all of you. What is some criticism that you've received from a colleague that you don't think you would have received if you were a man?
I'm going to give a very bold response, and hopefully I don't offend anybody on the call. A colleague once told me that I needed to become the angry Black woman in order to handle a conflict. And that definitely was the most off-putting statement that has been made to me. Obviously, it's very stereotypical, a very stereotypical statement, but I regret in the moment I didn't know how to respond. Okay, so that's something I'm going to pivot. That's something that we all need to work on developing. When you receive these types of comments, be prepared to respond, and you're going to have to practice it, because the first time it happens, you're going to be in shock that someone actually said that to you. And when the next time it happens, because it's going to happen again, you'll be better prepared to respond. So that particular incident, I didn't quite know how to respond. And for the rest of that day, I came up with an entire list of ways to respond. So if this ever happened again, I would be prepared.
Yeah, I would say I have a wonderful job now. Georgia College has never been my issue. In my positions, I find myself very lucky. Calling back to kind of restaurant world, I helped to open the Brick and Macon. That is a very stressful thing to do, is to open a new restaurant. And I was definitely called a B word a few times in that. And you're trying to open a restaurant, you're gonna have customers coming in soon, you have 1,000 moving pieces, and the best thing I could do was say, okay, right, thank you, but like, we have to get this next thing done. Yes, I got very upset later and said, how dare they call me that? Like, I am not, I'm just trying to move us all forward. But kind of in that moment, the best I could do was just, we're going to save that for later, and we're still kind of focused on this next piece. Yeah, I definitely don't think I would have been called that if I was another manager who was helping to open the restaurant at the time.
Mm-hmm. And so I think for my example, I learned that one of the programmers had changed some numbers, and those numbers impacted people's results from a sales perspective. And I was livid because really and truly, to me, it's just borderline. It's not borderline. It is cheating. But because that person was friends with one of the senior leaders, there was nothing done about it. And I was told that I was just being emotional. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't being emotional. I was being straight up the manager that was saying, I want someone to be held accountable for the fact that we have cheated. I don't care how you look at it, this is cheating. And so that was mine. And the only thing that I did as a result of that was just ask that the people that were involved be held accountable, just like my team would have been held accountable had they done the exact same thing and were discovered. So, but I was told I was being emotional. So I was like, I'll take that.
And then really quick, last question is from Jessica Butler. What are some ways that your roles as a woman in leadership have been tested during the pandemic? And has it made you more progressive during this time, or have you seen some setbacks?
I'll do a quick one. I mean, who hasn't felt something through this past year? trying to either find yourself, find new passions, feeling overwhelmed. Some of the best parts of my job went away when we had to do more work from home, getting to interact with students, getting to have those really great conversations. So I kind of struggled a little bit to figure out, what's going to keep me going to the next day, what's going to keep me motivated to do the next piece. And it was, it changed the nature of my job a little bit. And I'm thankful that we're able to do more things, when we've worked in Zoom and we've done more WebEx and Microsoft Teams things. So the parts that I do enjoy about my job, I, get to still have those, and those are the things that keep me moving forward. So it, the nature of our jobs changed. It did for everyone. So still trying to find ways to do those things that you enjoy the most.
I'll state that the pandemic crisis allowed me to exhibit more compassion for our students, for my colleagues. We tend to, as women leaders, we tend to shy away from those touchy-feely, adjective to describe us. And this is one that I think I was able to embrace, and it was well received because we were all going through this crisis together. And I think it was appreciated, my ability to exhibit that level of compassion for people they're losing loved ones. Their families will never be the same because of what they've been through. And so recognizing that, being able to put myself in their position, relate to them, and just exhibiting that compassion.
Yeah, and so I would say just not so much from my role at Georgia College, but probably as my role as a chaplain for the hospital. That's probably been the most stressful piece of it, and not because of having to be at the hospital, but not being allowed to be at the hospital. Over the time of the pandemic, we were not allowed to be there because of for so many different reasons, but mainly because our chaplaincy role is a volunteer role, and the hospital did not want to expose their volunteers. But thinking about all of these families that were going through just very, very stressful times, just weighed heavily on a lot of the chaplains, including myself, on our hearts, because we wanted to be able to do more for those families and just to be there to support the families during this most difficult time for them. So I think that would probably be it. And I am one of just a few female chaplains on our chaplaincy team. There's 3 of us out of probably about 25 or 30 chaplains. Yeah, but that's the one that I would pretty much point out. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much to everyone for coming, and to our panel speakers. Jessica posted our website for Women in Leadership, so please feel free to visit that for more information on this topic. But again, a special thank you to our panel members for joining us today and making time for this event. We really appreciate it. I feel like it went great, and I feel like everyone learned a lot. So thank you so much for coming. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.